Okay, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about graphing systems of equations. We're going to take equations and we're going to graph them together. But before we do that, I want to tell you about a couple people I know. This is Stephanie and Camila, and they're not super huge fans of math necessarily, but you know what they really are into? They're super into 1972 Chevrolet El Caminos. I know, they're pretty sweet cars, and these girls love them. And you know what? They've been saving up all of their money to buy as many Chevrolet El Caminos as they can. So they've been saving up their allowance and their babysitting money and their birthday money, and they've just been buying as many El Caminos as they can. So far, they have 4 El Caminos between the two of them. So if X is the number of El Caminos that Stephanie owns, and if Y is the number of El Caminos that Camila owns, then what we would do is we would say that there's a total of 4 El Caminos between the two of them. That's pretty impressive. Now, how do we know if it's 2 for Stephanie and 2 for Camila, or if Camila has all 4, or which ones belong to who? Well, I'm going to give you another clue about this mystery. I'm going to tell you that Camila owns 3 times as many El Caminos as Stephanie. So the number of Caminos that Camila owns is 3 times as many as the number of El Caminos that Stephanie owns. Y equals 3 times X. Now, if we take all of that information and we try to solve the mystery, what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve the system of equations. We're trying to come up with a solution. What does X equal and what does Y equal? In this scenario, maybe you can look at these 2 equations and maybe you can tell that there's only one combination of numbers that would work for X and Y. There's lots of numbers that add up to 4, but there's only 2 numbers that add up to 4 where one of them is 3 times as big as the other. And so you can see here that X would equal 1 and Y would equal 3. Maybe you can see that. Maybe you couldn't have ever guessed that on your own, and maybe we need to figure out how could we have solved that and gotten that solution even if we didn't know it just by looking at it. Well, today is your lucky day because we're going to talk about a method that is going to help us get that solution mathematically. This is called the graphing method, and what we have to remember with the graphing method is our good old friend y equals mx plus b. And whenever your equation is in the form mx plus b, remember that the m number is the slope of your line and the b is the y-intercept of your line. So for this y equals 3x equation, the 3 is our slope, and since there's nothing else after it, it's like 3x plus 0. So our y-intercept is actually 0. So when we go to graph this, we're going to start at 0 for the y-intercept, and our slope is going to be 3, which is like 3 over 1, which is like up 3 over 1. And we put another dot, and we connect the dots. And that line was fairly easy to graph. What about x plus y equals 4? That's not in y equals mx plus b slope-intercept form. So I've got to take x away and take x away. So I just have y by itself, and I have negative x plus 4 on the right side. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Hopefully you can see how I rearranged that equation so that it's in mx plus b form, so that now when I can identify the slope, it's like the negative 1 that's in front of the x, and then the y-intercept is that 4. Now I can graph that line by making a line that goes through 4 and it goes down 1 over 1. Now what you can see is that these 2 lines intersect each other at a certain point. Right there. And hey, that happens to be the exact point that gave us the solution in the very first beginning. So what I want you to learn here is that the solution to a system of equations is always the point where the 2 lines cross. Amazing! The solution to a system of equations is always the point where the 2 lines cross each other, the point where the 2 lines intersect. And what that means is we can solve a system just by graphing the 2 equations and seeing where they intersect. That's right. We can solve a system just by graphing the two equations and seeing where they intersect. So if you had a more complicated system of equations like this, and you didn't know how to kind of figure it out in your head, you don't have to figure it out in your head. You can just graph each of these two equations and see where those two lines cross each other. Write down the coordinates of that point where they intersect, and that is the solution to your system of equations. So I want you to try this one. Get some graph paper or make a grid and try plotting these two lines on a graph and seeing where they cross. Okay, now, if I gave you this example, this would be a little bit more difficult because the second equation, y equals 1/2 x minus 2, that is in slope-intercept form, isn't it? But the first equation is not in slope-intercept form. In fact, it's not even close. We would need to get the y by itself on this equation before we could graph it. So, what we're going to talk about in class tomorrow is how do you take 3x plus 4y equals 8, and how do you put it into slope-intercept form so you can find the slope, find the intercept, turn it into a line on a graph so that you can solve this system of equations. We'll try that in class tomorrow, but as long as you could get the first practice problem, you're in pretty good shape. All right, that's all I got to say to you today. So I hope you learned something, and I will see you in class tomorrow.